So just to set the context just a little bit, I think we're probably here all pretty aware of homelessness, but homelessness, of course, is not just a problem for the unhoused. And one of the ironies of our situation today is how much it costs us. And if you've been reading the news, you probably know some of this already. There was a study in 2014 that revealed in 3 central Florida counties that they were spending $31,000 a year on 1,500 individuals, whereas it would only cost them a little over $10,000 a year to actually house them. And this isn't anything new. In New York, there was a study in 2009 of more than 10,000 homeless individuals, in Los Angeles, and they discovered when they were housed, they were spending $607 a month on them in supportive services, but when they were living on the street, they were spending almost $2,900 a month on those same 10,000 individuals. And then in 2002, going even farther back, a study in New York found that they were spending over $40,000 on the unhoused mentally ill in the city of New York. So we have to start asking our question, how long are we going to keep using this failed strategy that is costing the public more money than it would be to actually provide them with housing? And meanwhile, instead, what do? We put up all kinds of barriers. This is in my community. Boulders underneath our bridges that were added by the Transportation Department of Oregon just last year. So, we don't want anybody sleeping under our bridges and finding shelter from the rain, do we? Or in our state capitol building where they put, 2x4s on the benches because we wouldn't want anyone lying down on the benches. And then you just think about all the laws that we institute that make it difficult. And you may know that HUD has just recently released new guidelines that they are going to start penalizing communities who are not actively decriminalizing homelessness. Even though we have a camping ban in Eugene, our civic leaders aren't too worried yet because they know there are a lot of other cities that are doing much worse things than what we are doing. But the direction of the trend is clear that our federal government, at least under the current administration, is starting to put pressure on communities to think seriously about their laws and practices to make it at least a little more civil for the homeless to live in our midst. And for those who have no other shelter, of course, then the only choice then is to find some place to sleep wherever you can. In the alleyways, under the bridges if it's possible, or to band together in communities, self-organized communities, tent cities. And we're beginning to see these emerge all around the country, but they are constantly forced to move in most communities from place to place. And we have this happening in my community right now where we have one particular group that has banded together and has had, I don't know what they're up to now, 15, 20 different campsites in around the city. They go and they camp for anywhere from 3 days to 2 weeks, depending on how long they'll be tolerated, and then forced to move to another site. And of course, there is often a stigma and a shame that comes with being homeless, but the real shame is that we have made it nearly impossible for the poorest of the poor to live with any dignity in our midst. So tonight what I want to do is just share with you actually 6 approaches that we are using in our community. I originally planned to do 4, but on the way out I thought of 2 more. Just to set the context for us in Eugene, the federal government, HUD, requires us to do a one-night homeless count every year. It's called the point-in-time count. It's done, actually every other year is done, is the entire count. In the off years, they only count the people that are in shelters. But every 2 years, we actually go out and we try to find all the homeless people that we can. And in Eugene, the last count was done in January of this year. We found just right around 1,500 individuals who were homeless, and about 60% of those were without any shelter, living on the street. So we're talking 800, 900 people in our community without any shelter, living on our streets. I became the minister, as Catherine says, 25 years ago at First Christian Church in Eugene. It's a very historic downtown church. And I had no intent of making this the focus of my ministry. But being in that downtown setting, just constantly found people coming in seeking help from one kind or another. And like many communities of our size, we have a very fine mission. It is religious-oriented, a gospel mission that has been doing this ministry now for since the 50s. And it has 450 beds. It includes a family shelter for women and children. Men have to sleep in the men's dormitory. And the problem is they have done such an excellent job that basically the community deferred all of the homeless services to this one agency, particularly for those for single adults. And we basically put no effort into providing any other kind of shelter for single adults and others, couples without children. We do have a lot of programs for very specific targeted populations, people that suffer from brain injuries, domestic violence victims, and other special needs of that type. But meanwhile, the problem has just continued to grow and grow over the years and got us to that point where the need just far exceeds the capacity of what we are able to do. So when I arrived in Eugene in 1991, we had just begun to start what we called our Interfaith Family Shelter. So this is the first program I'm going to talk about just briefly. And we did it without a building. We said this was going to be a temporary fix to provide for families because the family center run by the mission was not able to deal with all the families. We didn't have any other facility. So a group of churches organized and said, all right, we'll take them into our building. And St. Vincent de Paul is an excellent nonprofit who agreed to provide some oversight of that. And it's designed to move from church to church to church, typically 1 week at a time, although now we're up to 3 weeks in our facility. And very well organized in these little cubicles where the families have a little bit of privacy. 10 to 12 families at a time, only through the school year. So it opens when the school year starts, closes when the school year's in, and St. Vinny's works really hard to try to connect those families with other services, assist to try to get them in permanent housing. We get a little bit of feedback, and I'm trying to stay away from the... Well, I'll go to that side. I didn't realize that's why you wanted me over there. So. I don't mind being to the left. And then in 1997, this is our second creative approach, we had a car camp for 3 years in our community that was run by a couple of different nonprofits. Basically, it was just a parking lot where we allowed all the homeless with vehicles to come and to be in one spot. But we ran into constant problems. Brawls and fights and violence and different things breaking out that just made it a bit of a policing nightmare. And so the city closed it down in '97, and the advocates said, well, you've got to provide an alternative, and if you don't provide an alternative, we're going to start engaging in civil disobedience and disrupting city council meetings and the like. So they created what we call the Car Camping Ordinance, that allowed churches, nonprofits, businesses, anyone with a parking lot to have up to 3 vehicles on their site. And the deal was you have to provide sanitation and a porta potty or an access to a toilet as part of it. Eventually, at some point, the city also provided a little bit of money. I think it was about $30,000 as the grant to actually pay for those services. So a news reporter came to me the night the city council was taking the vote and said, well, if the city council approves this, will your church allow it? And well, I said, yeah, we probably would. The very next day, I get a phone call from a woman who says, I have an RV I'd like to donate to you if you will use it to house the homeless. And within 2 weeks, we had 3 trailers, and so began our trailer ministry in the back of our church. That has housed now, I think, 140 different individuals in whatever that is since 1997, so about 18 years that we have been running this trailer ministry. And it has been anywhere literally from one night to 8 or 9 years. This woman right here was one of our longer ones. She's actually now a member of the church. And it took her about 8 or 9 years before she was able to qualify to get the assistance that she needed to move out. And for 3 of those years, she served on a national committee and was paid to go back to Washington, D.C. A couple of times a year to serve on this national committee on homelessness. So she's a delightful woman. When she moved in, she was so excited because she was a student at our community college at the time. She was living in a pickup truck. The back of the pickup truck was full of her stuff, so she was sleeping on the seat in the front. And she says, it is so hard to study when you have to hang your flashlight from the rear view mirror. And to be able to sit at a desk to study in her little camper here, to have a bed to lay down in, it was like we'd moved her into the Taj Mahal. And we've had that kind of reactions several times with different individuals. It's been a very powerful experience. We even had a 5th wheel donated to us 2 years into the program by one family, valued at over $10,000. Because they said, we want to see this being used for the homeless. In our case, we provided utilities. It's not a requirement of the program. Many of the sites don't have utilities. There are, I believe, over 25 sites in our community now where this is happening. About somewhere between 70 and 80 individuals in those sites. 2 years ago, the City Council expanded it from 3 maximum to 6. That are allowed in any one site, though not very many have gone to that. And we're still only doing 3 at our site because we just don't have the space. So that was the second program. The third, look at my notes, 2007, Major Thomas Egan, a Vietnam veteran, froze to death on the streets of Eugene. He was just a couple of blocks from the mission where he could have found shelter, or it's possible that he was kicked out because we assumed that he was likely drunk at the time, a severe alcoholic with a problem. But he had a lot of friends in the community. Our county commissioner served with him in the reserves and thought very highly of him. He used to have him over to his house for dinner. After his death, some organizers got together, and this is a memorial service that's held every year at the site where he died. Advocates got together and formed what we call the Egan Warming Center. Again, using churches, church basements. We have 6 churches now. On nights when it's below 30 degrees, we open up a warming center. There's an activation system where emails go out, robocalls go out. We've trained over 1,000 volunteers to run this. We have 1 half-time staff person paid again with a grant from the city to organize it. And each night it's open. It takes somewhere in the neighborhood of 80 to 100 volunteers each night to staff it at those 6 different locations. It serves about 300 people. And I can tell you for sure it has saved lives. The one that really stands out in my mind, I'll tell you 2 stories. I came into the office one morning with a big pile of stuff in the parking lot. And I said, what on earth? Come to find out, the Eugene police came across a woman who was camping, and they forced her to come in because they came to the conclusion she would freeze to death if she didn't. She was not adequately prepared for temperatures on that night in the teens. And so they packed up all of her gear and then just dumped it in our parking lot. I wasn't very happy with them. I said they could have done something else with all of her gear. But I've no doubt they saved her life. And if we hadn't had that facility open, she quite likely would have frozen to death. On another occasion, I came to work, and as I pulled up to work, literally I was being mooned by a man who was trying to pull on his pants, and his zipper, I immediately ascertained as I drove up, was in the back of his pants. He had them on wrong, and he was struggling with them. He couldn't get them on. And I took him down to, they had already closed down the warming center, and everyone has to leave when they close it down, and so all the staff are gone. But I brought him in, I said, come on, let me help you here. And took him in where he could sit down. I said, you need to turn your pants around. And so he fumbled around, and I realized he didn't have any socks and he didn't have a belt. We have a clothing ministry in the church, so I went to our helping hand room praying to God that there was a belt there. I just kept hearing the sayings of Jesus, whoever is without two cloaks, whoever has two cloaks, give the person who has none, right? And sure enough, I lost my belt. At any rate, I got him situated, got his pants on, got the belt on him, got him some socks, and sent him back out the door, and he's stumbling away. And I thought, people are going to think this man is drunk. But he just spent the night at the church. I knew he didn't have anything to drink. And so I reported to the Egan people. I said, something's wrong with Bill. I don't know what it is. And the woman in charge said, you know, I know Bill. He doesn't stumble like that. When he came back, unfortunately he did come back that evening, they called the EMTs, came in, evaluated him, took him to the hospital, discovered that he'd had a stroke. And if we had not been there, the likelihood when it's in the teens like that is that he would have fallen somewhere and not gotten up again. So that's our third program. So in spite of all of these efforts, we still have 60% of the homeless that have no shelter. And to make matters worse, about 2.5, 3 years ago, the mission decided to become a clean and sober site. Which I fully understand the reasons for doing it. It was just becoming too risky. They were having problems with people dealing drugs in the mission. And so they evicted over 100 people from the mission with addiction issues, and suddenly now they're on the streets and have nowhere else to go. And meanwhile, we had a group of politically active folk that were part of the Occupy movement, who during that time were camping out in solidarity with the people in Wall Street. And the homeless in our community said, hey, cool, here's a place where we can camp. Can we join you? And so the homeless started camping with these political activists and forming these relationships. And when that closed down at the end of 2011, the advocates said, hey, we've got to figure out something else for our friends that we've made to provide them some housing. And the mayor formed a task force and invited me to serve on it to try to figure out some strategies. And the number one recommendation of that task force was to create a legal place for the homeless to be. And so we created 2 new programs. The first we call rest stops. And these are legalized campsites within the city limits on public property. And you can imagine there's the typical not in my backyard kind of syndrome when you try to cite these. But they've actually been run very well. They're very attractive. They're limited to 20 people per site, and we have 4 sites that are now in operation. 3 of them are managed by this nonprofit called Community Supported Shelters that was created specifically for this purpose. The head of that nonprofit, actually members of our church, Eric DeBurr right here, and they build these Conestoga wagons, we call them, because Conestoga huts, because they look like a Conestoga wagon. Very simple structure, 6 by 10. They have a bubble wrap that provides insulation, and then another sheeting over that. Cost in the neighborhood of about $1,200 to build. And Eric has built over 50 of these now that are scattered throughout the city in the car camping sites. We went to the city and asked for permission to use them in those car camping, in the car camping program. Even though they're not vehicles, the car camping ordinance says it has to be a vehicle. Well, the city attorney came up with a clever idea. We'll just define these as vehicles. So we call them vehicles with brick, cement square wheels. But that's where this particular site is the Veterans Rest Stop. It's actually located on the property of the mission, so they all have to be clean and sober. But for vets in particular who have PTSD issues, it's much better in this place where they can be, have their own facility rather than being in a big dorm situation and dealing with a lot of other guys. The fourth rest stop is run by another coalition called the Nightingale Health Sanctuary that has the specific mission to help people in recovery. And it is the only shelter that we have in our community that is what you might call officially a wet shelter. That is, that people can have an active addiction. But the interesting thing that I've discovered through the work that I'm doing in Opportunity Village, I just had this conversation just last week with one of our residents there, an alcoholic who finally fessed up. We all suspected that she had a drinking problem, but she finally fessed up to it for the first time she ever told us. This is a woman who's in her late 50s. First time she ever confessed that she had a drinking program. And she a drinking problem. She said when she was on the street, she drank twice as much as when she came to our shelter program. She said in the shelter program, she didn't need to drink as much. And I thought, you know, that's very interesting. People on the street, you know, use either alcohol or drugs in order to cope. And when you get them off the street, that goes down. Now, it didn't go away. She thought first she could get a hold of the problem when she came into the village because she wasn't drinking as much, but after living there for a number of months, she realized that it wasn't sufficient. And she needed to take the next step. And so Nightingale, very well organized with a library and a kitchen and just a very attractive facility. They've done a good job. People have asked me about how we build these things, and this just gives you an idea of the very simple structure. We're talking about just a platform, PVC piping with sheeting to provide protection from the Oregon sunshine. My sister is from Oregon, she understands the joke. And it's run entirely by volunteers. They have no staff, whereas community-supported shelters, Eric and his wife run the program and are actually staff of the nonprofit, but live a very simple lifestyle that is below poverty standards, if you measure it that way. And doing a terrific job. So now the fifth initiative is the program that I direct, Opportunity Village Eugene. It is a gated community for the homeless. It is self-managed with very minimal oversight from the board of directors. We opened it in August of 2013, so now running for a little over 2 years. And our mission is to create a new model of housing that gives the unhoused a place to belong and a new community to be a part of, to start essentially at square one. Hence, we call the nonprofit SquareOne Villages. I began as the president of the board and am now the executive director. We discovered in order to get money, we had to have staffing, so now I'm staff. We've gained attention from a number of media sources. The Associated Press, CNN featured us on their website for 10 top designs, BuzzFeed, The Guardian in Britain, and MSNBC did a video for us. I'm going to show it just a bit. It was built in over 9 months, mostly with volunteer labor. There was a little bit we had to pay for. Just had a lot of folks. We found there's no shortage of people who love to build. And if you provide them the lumber and the materials, they just get really excited, right? And so it's just really fun. A lot of the villagers themselves were a part of the build process. And it's developed into a very neat little community with an average stay of around 9 months. There's no maximum length of stay, but all residents are expected to be working on a transition plan to move out of the village. And indeed, 45 people have transitioned out since we opened up. Over half of those into permanent housing, but only 3 of those with any kind of public assistance, Section 8 vouchers and the like. All villagers are required to do 10 hours of service in the village. Most of that's gate duty, because it is a gated community, and it's there's someone at that front gate 24/7. One of the villagers sleeps overnight in the gatehouse. And so that just ensures that only the people that are supposed to be there are actually there. They're all required to participate in the village meeting where all decisions are made. There is a resident council of 7 members who makes decisions in between meetings, but basically the village is run by the entire community. And they do a good job of it. The first night it opened, I got a phone call. We had 14 people we worked with for about 2 months, developing the guidelines and the rules and the structure, got it all together. We had those volunteers come in, built the first 5 structures, moved the 14 people in. They had to have tents for the first few months until we finished building. First night I get a phone call. This is Bill. I just want to let you know that Joe came in drunk and took a swing at somebody, so we kicked him out. And I thought, this is going to be a failure, you know, our first night. It was the best thing that could happen. Joe was forced to go back to the mission, and it's now clean and sober. He had to clean up his act, and he did. Went through their life change program, and really was the best thing for him. And for the village, it demonstrated they could live by the rules. They could manage their affairs. They didn't need a staff person to tell them how to do it. They knew what to do. They dealt with the situation, and they moved on. And it's been that way ever since. It's just been a great program. We were fortunate to have a young man, Andrew Egan, who came, had just finished his dissertation on tent city villages. He had visited several around the country and actually lived in one for 3 months in Michigan. And he wrote a book on it called Tent City Urbanism that's available on Amazon.com. That really describes the kind of social structure of these villages and the self-organization and the different types of villages. And so Andy has been kind of our concept guy and is our project director for our next project. Lots of good things happened. We've even had 2 weddings at the village of couples who've been married while they were there. So, some people have already seen the PBS video, and if you haven't, there's a link to it on our website, SquareOneVillages.org. I want to show you the video that was featured on MSNBC that really gives you a good feel for what life in the village is like. It's just 5 minutes long.
Word and sunshine. You got to admit, for going on the middle of December, though, it could be a lot worse. I know a lot of places that are in snow right now. This technically is a singles bungalow. This is one of the smaller ones. This is an 8x8 as opposed to ones like this over here, this over here, a double, Big enough for 2 good friends to be able to sit in their chairs in the evening when they're not at the yurt or somewhere else, It encourages you to get out more often, I guess you could say. And of course, the master bedroom upstairs here in the loft. But we work at home online, but then that job was farmed out overseas, and so the employment opportunity ceased. At this point in time, it was like the saying going through the hourglass, it was just a matter of time before we had to step out somewhere else. We found out about Opportunity Village. I believe there was an article in one of the local newspapers about it, and I saw the outlay, the design of the place, and so we thought about checking it out.
If what's expected is you go straight from homeless to, hey, go rent an apartment, that's a leap. That's not a step. I was off and on homeless for 3 years. I was faced with this huge leap, and you bust your ass.
Eggs are donated, but unfortunately they're usually broke or outdated, so you have to be careful.
The smaller you can make the steps for homeless people to get off the streets, the easier it is.
If people are going to go looking for work, they need to be able to have a place where they can have a roof over their head if at all possible. They need to be able to have a shower facility where they shower and be presentable to go out and work. There are 33, 34 people who live here in the village, and we share community eating areas, food preparation areas. And in any environment like this, you're going to have a number of different personalities.
Boxes with our name on it, we have our stuff in the kitchen with our name on it.
It doesn't apply in the laundry room. That is a community area, and everyone uses the laundry, and we don't have storage for it.
So it's a work in progress, a daily thing that the villagers just kind of have to be able to work within that framework of each other.
And I thought we had some sort of an understanding as to making people not feel alienated from being on those computers.
What's good for one of us is good for all of us. If we all work together towards the same thing, we're all in the same boat here.
I do think everyone's intentions, even if it's not to make themselves better, I believe that they want to make this a better place to stay. And not for nothing, if they don't want this to be a better place to stay and they don't want to get better themselves, that should be the two rule breakers. If all you have to do is wake up in the morning, take a shower, work a 10-hour day, you got to come home, put your laundry in, while laundry's working, you make a really nice dinner. That's not feasible when you're homeless. It's tough, and so to me, this is a perfect scenario, for people that want to actually, again, use it as a stepping stone to move forward with their life.
The population of homeless are here in our county is, most of them are ours. They don't come from other places. We are a county as big as Connecticut. We have to think differently.
You can't drive down any street in America where you don't see people who are legitimately homeless, and there's got to be a solution to that. The solutions have to be found, and solutions have to be worked on.
The smaller you can make the steps for homeless people to get off the streets, the easier it is. I'm in the perfect place for me right now. I can take care of my fines, I can take care of my child support, I can actually maybe get a full-time job, get an apartment, start, getting my kids again. These are the things that motivate me. What I'm not willing to do is give up.
Good? Okay. So that last gentleman who spoke was a police officer before he became homeless. So just briefly, the village has 29 units in it. 9 of them are these Conestogas, 20 are bungalows. We built it for just over $200,000, about half of that in kind, half in cash. When you amortize those expenses over 5 years, add the utility costs of about $1,200 a month, it costs us $3 per person per night to run, and the villagers pay $1 of those $3, so our net cost is just $2. We think it is the most cost-effective shelter for the homeless in the country. One of the biggest problems we have is helping, whoops, I forgot the slides here, is helping people to transition. Now, and I'll come back to that. The city contracted with the University of Oregon with a program to do a thorough evaluation of our program and the rest stops, a 360-day review, and they came to these conclusions that 90% of the neighboring residents and businesses were supportive of the program and reported no change to their surroundings. Everyone's concerned the neighborhood's going to decline, there's going to be an increase in crime, what have you. None of that happened. The residents indicated that living in these communities, the rest stop in the village, increased their self-confidence, made them feel more independent, gave them a sense of community. More than 70% of the residents indicated that staying at the rest stop or the village is helping them to transition into permanent housing. And then their final conclusion, the rest stop program and Opportunity Village are working. This is perhaps the most important conclusion of this work. They went on to say that considering the experience of the residents, neighbors, and program managers, all three groups reported positive experiences within the program. One of the consistent themes we heard was that the program should be expanded. So, transitioning out, we have a number of people in the village who have income but cannot find an affordable place to live. Our housing authority provides just under 1,000 affordable housing units and 3,000 Section 8 vouchers. And on their website, they list the wait time that it takes to get into public supported housing. And for a family that needs a 2-bedroom apartment, the wait time is just 1 year. Family needing 2 or 4 bedrooms, the wait time is 2 to 3 years. But if you're a single individual or you're a couple without children like my friends Juan and Rhonda here, the wait time is over 5 years. And in fact, the Housing Authority has stopped taking applications for single bedroom apartments, the most affordable apartment there should be, because the waiting list is so long. So basically, if you're a single individual or you don't have children, you're out of luck. And when you look at the way we build affordable housing in this country, you can understand why that is. And the case in point is a brand new project, beautiful project being built in our community that blends in very well with the neighborhood. It's being built in 2 phases at a cost of $17 million for 101 households of various sizes. That comes out to $169,000 per unit. Now that does include some very nice amenities, community center, laundry facilities, and the like. But here's the big problem. In the point in time count that I mentioned before, we have over 700 chronically homeless in our community. That means they've been homeless for over a year or have been homeless on 4 occasions in the past 3 years. So if you take those 700 people and you built them traditional affordable housing at a reduced price of just $125,000 per unit, take out all the amenities, get it down to the bare necessities, that would cost over $44 million to provide just for those 700 individuals, and that's doubling them up at 2 per apartment. And that's not counting the more than 10,000 people that we know become homeless temporarily at some time during the year. So clearly we will not be able to build our way out of this crisis. We have to find a different way to build affordable housing that does not require massive amounts of government assistance in order to build it. So we want to dream big with tiny houses that are safe, secure, and significantly more affordable. So this is our next project, my 6th and final idea, permanent housing. It's truly affordable. We are calling Emerald Village Eugene. It will be unlike any other affordable housing project in the country. We are seeking to build 20 to 22 tiny homes of 150 to 250 square feet each. We've set a limit of no more than $15,000 in material costs, though on the flight out I was seated next to a contractor from St. Louis who, when I described the project, he says we could build it in this area of the country for half that because our material costs are much less than they are in Oregon. And then, of course, using donated labor. This is our demo unit that we built. It's actually only 120 square feet. But it meets the definition of a dwelling unit under the 2015 International Residential Code. It includes a full bath, tiny kitchen, a little kitchenette, toilet and a shower, a place for a bed, and we've checked it out with our city code department, and everything works. We have recruited. I started with one architect, a friend of mine, with whom we build houses in Mexico, spring break, take 100 kids down, build a couple of very tiny houses very quickly. And I said, we need to do that in our community, and I want you to build and donate this house to me, and I want you to find 4 of your architect friends to do the same. He sent out an email to 7, and they all said yes. I did a presentation to the American Institute of Architects, and 5 more said yes. We now have 13 architects designing tiny homes for us. I bet you there are architects in this community who would love to do that, right? And they all want to design the larger units of 250 square feet, so we said fine. And so each one of those units is going to be unique. And the residents are going to pay $250 to $325 per month, including all utilities, fees, everything. And these will be very simply built so that we can maximize the use of volunteers. And as I said, we've already cleared all the code issues with the city so that they meet all the code requirements. But here's the really exciting thing about this project, and I don't know why my slide didn't show up there, maybe it's on the next one, is that unlike most affordable housing projects in the country, the residents of Emerald Village, Eugene will not be renters. They will actually be members of a homeowners association, and they will own a share of the village. So that payment will also include about $75 to $100 that will go into their equity. So that if and when they decide to move out, they don't need to, it's permanent housing, but we will buy them out. And so that they can take that cash asset with them for whatever they need to move into other housing. We have our first property that we've already bought. It cost us $300,000. I think property is less here in this community. And we're working with the city. We're about ready to submit the site plan. So for the cost of 2 traditional American homes or 4 traditional public housing units, that we can build 20 tiny homes to house 30 people. Let me put it differently. For every one of these at $17 million, we can build 22 of these at $750,000 each, and that includes the price of the property, whereas that $17 million for that public affordable housing project does not. That property was given to them by the city. So it all begins with this one pilot project, because we believe just because someone is poor, they should not have to have poor housing, or worse, no housing at all. And our goal then is to enable many of our citizens who need and desire such to live affordably with the pride of their own homes. We want to create a tiny version of the American dream so that the residents of this project will have the pride, the dignity, and most importantly, the benefit of home ownership. And we believe this will be just the first of many more such projects to come. So I gave you there our website, my email address, dan@SquareOneVillages.org. If there are more, if I can send you anything, more information, details, always glad to do that. So I'm going to turn it over to you, and you can direct the questions. I'm glad to answer any questions you have.